Let's now turn to another special guest. I'm joined by Prashant Reddy. He's co-author of the book, The Truth Pill, that exposed the lid of drug regulation in India. Appreciate your joining us, Prashant Reddy. When you first heard about these deaths of children who had consumed a particular cough syrup, what was your first reaction?
I mean, I was saddened, but I wasn't surprised because this is the 9th such incident that we've had since 1972. And this just seems to keep repeating itself. I mean, the last set of tragedies that we had was in 2022 and 2023, where 70 children died in Gambia, 65 children died in Uzbekistan, another 12 died in Cameroon, all because of cough syrups manufactured from India. And since then, we've known that there is a problem because when the government introduced a mandatory testing requirement for exports, 100 companies' samples failed testing. And that's published in the news. The Economic Times had carried a story on it last year. So we knew that there was a rampant problem with cough syrups, but we didn't see any systemic steps being taken to protect the domestic market and, patients in India.
So specifically, where is the problem? Here you've got a company which is operating virtually out of a tin shed. There's a sense that it's involved in cost cutting when it comes to drug formulations. Where is the problem in this entire chain? Is it with the regulator? Is it with the companies? At what stage is the system throwing up, unfortunately, drugs that simply don't meet up to recognized standards?
The issue is definitely systemic and it spans both the industry and the regulator because our drug regulatory system was designed in 1940 and we have just built certain layers of additional regulation, but our system is fundamentally outdated to deal with this kind of regulation, to deal with the growth of the pharmaceutical industry in India. But a good starting point to understand where the problem is to ask the Tamil Nadu drug inspector to show inspection reports of this particular agency, because every facility is supposed to be inspected at least once a year. Even if that yearly inspection doesn't happen, there should have been an inspection every couple of years. So we need to find out how was this plant running in such a ramshackle state if it was being inspected regularly.
But could this be just one consignment of cold fit, or do you believe it's much more than that? In this case, one consignment which reached Madhya Pradesh's Chhindwara appears to have been the deadly toxic cough syrup. Do you believe it's just a consignment, or it's much wider than that? This could be today Chhindwara, it could be any other part of the country tomorrow.
No, I'm pretty sure it's going to be wider than this because we've seen previous tragedies, the way they play out. Because until the government identifies the supplier of the contaminated ingredient, which in this case is propylene glycol, the propylene glycol supplied by the chemical trader to this particular company in Tamil Nadu was likely supplied even to other manufacturers. And if even they fail to do similar testing as the Tamil Nadu manufacturer, chances are this contaminated ingredient has gotten into several more consignments of cough syrups, which is why the first response right now should be a public health response, wherein you can wait for prosecutions fixing accountability later, but the government should focus on tracking down every contaminated consignment of cough syrup and make sure that they're pulled from the market as quickly as possible, as well as identify other patients who may have consumed this cough syrup, but where the doctors have not yet detected that it is contaminated. We know the Chhindwara case makes a difference because 12 children together died in a cluster. But there will be other cases where, 1 or 2 children have consumed this cough syrup in different localities, and the doctors will not even realize that this is a contamination issue over here, because it's very, very difficult to diagnose a death because of DEG poisoning, which is what has happened over here.
Mr. Reddy, the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, or Cdsco, I found interestingly in a stunning display of complacency, initially declared just on Friday that the tests had found no contamination. in the syrups that were being linked to the deaths. Even a Ministry of Health statement that I saw on October 3rd seemed to suggest that various samples collected in coordination with the state authorities contained, none of the samples contained diethylene glycol. So am I to understand that there is something fundamentally wrong with the way in which the body operates? That there is either lack of transparency or no accountability, or indeed that there is just weak enforcement?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's definitely been an attempt here to cover up, because we now know that test reports are publicly available, that Tamil Nadu knew on October 2nd that the samples were contaminated. And on October 3rd, the ministry was putting out these misleading press releases through a news agency. Now, this is a systemic problem with the industry. This is with the regulator and the industry. We saw this happen even in 2022 after the tragedy in Gambia, where when the World Health Organization first put out an alert, the then Drug Controller General put out a very coarsely worded letter accusing the WHO of tarnishing the image of the drug industry. They also sent my co-author and me a legal notice calling us anti-national, because we gave an interview to India Today, coincidentally, on certain issues pertaining to that tragedy. So the reflex reaction of the bureaucracy generally in these tragedies is to try and cover up and protect itself from further scrutiny. And this is reflective of the larger political economy of the pharma industry, wherein for about the last 30, 40 years, the political signal sent to the regulator is, please ensure that the pharma industry grows. The focus has not been on quality control, and trying to take apart that kind of mindset in the government is very, very difficult. The first attempt is to always protect the industry.
Linked to that, I am again stunned. In 2023, the Lok Sabha passed the Jan Vishwas 2023 bill, which effectively diluted the provisions that would ensure strong criminal action against pharmaceutical bodies and hold them accountable for substandard medicines. Instead, what I see is that it has decriminalized provisions and actually said that you will only have to go through a monetary fine of rupees 1 lakh. So it seems as if the pharmaceutical industry has got now huge leeway. These are profit-making companies, many of them very large, and therefore at the cost of the patient, it's the pharma companies who in some way have become non-accountable. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes, Mr. Desai, you're absolutely right. In fact, the government introduced this Jan Vishwas Bill just 2 months after the tragedy in Gambia. That is around the last week of December 2022 is when they had introduced this bill. And despite my co-author and me trying to, point out, at least we wrote in newspapers pointing out that this is an, absolutely insane way to go about regulating the pharmaceutical industry, that you can't decriminalize one set of offenses. They went ahead and did it. And the Ministry of Health, in fact, they tried again to obfuscate the issue. There was, spreading press releases and WhatsApp groups for journalists trying to discredit us. But it went through. Now, to be clear, this kind of case of, adulterated cough syrups is still a criminal offense under the law. They can't get away with this particular case. But there's several other instances where, for example, a drug may not have enough active ingredient or may fail a sterility test, which can also kill, by the way. In Karnataka, we lost 5 young mothers in November last year because of sterility issues. Those kind of offenses have been decriminalized. The first offense has been decriminalized in the sense that if you get caught the first time, you can pay a fine of 20,000 rupees and get away with it. And it's not even a lakh, by the way, it's just 20,000 rupees.
So in a way, of course, we don't want to generalize and say all pharmaceutical companies do it, but as we are seeing, there are smaller ones who are clearly cutting corners and their drugs are proliferating in many ways across markets. In conclusion, therefore, if there was one thing that you would recommend today to ensure that tragedies like this, which were presumably avoidable, do not recur, I go back to even the JJ tragedy that took place all those years ago in Mumbai, where again, several people died for consuming the same drug for which young children have died today in Madhya Pradesh. That was in Mumbai. I ask you, what is that one thing you would like to see changed?
The one thing I would like to see change is more transparency. For example, if a manufacturing facility is inspected by a drug inspector, the inspection report should be publicly available. Other countries do it. There's no reason we can't. You can redact it to protect commercial information, but the rest of the report should be publicly available. Similarly, testing reports, right? The government does a lot of random sampling and testing of drugs from the market and its labs. Those test reports need to be publicly available in a public database, which is accessible and which people can search. Because even when, for example, big hospitals, big government, departments are procuring drugs, they have absolutely no way to verify the antecedents of a company from which they are purchasing drugs. And the information is available. It is just locked up in government files and government computers. They don't make the information publicly available. What's the point of spending all this money on drug inspectors doing these tests and inspections and then not sharing the information with the public?
Well, those are very prophetic. I hope those words are being listened to by someone within our governmental system. You need to de-bureaucratize it, make it more transparent, and ensure stricter enforcement surely in the future. I appreciate your joining us here, Mr. Reddy, here on the news today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And all I can assure our viewers is these are the stories that we will put right on top. This country needs better drug regulation. 16 innocent children died because they consumed a toxic and poisonous cough syrup. Simply unacceptable. And because it happened in Chhindwara, maybe it hasn't evoked the kind of public outrage it would have had this happen in any of our metro cities. I want you to think about that.